He sat at the negotiating table. He shook hands with the diplomats. He reviewed the documents. And then he walked out, went straight to social media, and declared that the very talks he had just participated in were a strategic mistake, and demanded the removal of his own government's chief negotiator. This is not a spy thriller. This is Iran, right now, today. And the man doing the sabotaging was sent there by Tehran. If that does not tell you how dangerous the next few weeks are, nothing will. What you are watching unfold in Iran right now is something the world has never quite seen before. Not just a nuclear negotiation, not just a diplomatic standoff, but a full-scale civil war of ideology, playing out in real time inside the government of a nuclear threshold state, while the clock on a deal with the United States is ticking. Today, we are going to break this story wide open. By the end of this video, you will understand 3 things that almost no one in mainstream media is explaining clearly. First, who exactly these super revolutionaries are, where their power comes from, and why Iran's new supreme leader cannot simply silence them. Second, the shocking detail about what one of them did inside the actual negotiating room that could single-handedly blow up any chance of a deal. Third, the hidden truth that analysts are only now beginning to say out loud. This faction does not actually want to kill a deal forever. They want something else entirely. And understanding what that is changes everything about how you read this crisis. We cover stories like this before anyone else. Subscribe right now and hit the bell icon, because this one is moving fast, and you do not want to miss a single update. Let us get into it. Here's what happened step by step. The United States and Iran are currently engaged in the most consequential nuclear negotiations since the original 2015 deal. After 8 weeks of devastating American and Israeli military strikes that began in late February 2026, strikes that killed Iran's former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Tehran came to the table under enormous pressure. Those talks moved to Islamabad, Pakistan last month. Iran sent a delegation. Inside that delegation was a parliamentarian named Mahmoud Nabavian, a member of a hardline faction called Jebheh Paydari, or the Endurance Front. Nabavian sat in those talks. He heard what was on the table. He observed the process. Then he returned home and did something that left diplomats stunned. He publicly declared the negotiations a strategic mistake. He went on social media and demanded the firing of Iran's own foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. He called the talks an act of disloyalty to the Islamic Republic. He was on the team, and he is now torching the team from the inside. That is where we are. That is the breaking moment. And it raises a question that hangs over everything. Who are these people? And do they have the power to blow up a peace deal that could prevent the next Middle East war? To understand the Endurance Front, you have to go back to 1979. When Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini led the Islamic Revolution and toppled the pro-Western Shah of Iran, he did not just create a government, he created an ideology, a theology of resistance, a worldview that placed opposition to the United States and Israel not merely as a political position, but as a divine obligation, something to be pursued until the end of history itself. For decades, that ideology was the glue holding the Islamic Republic together. But as years passed, Iran's political system became complex, divided between relative moderates willing to engage the West and hardliners who viewed any such engagement as betrayal. The 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was the ultimate expression of that moderate impulse. Iran agreed to constrain its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. Hardliners hated it. They saw it as capitulation. When Donald Trump tore up the deal in 2018, they were quietly satisfied. But then came 2026, American and Israeli bombs, 8 weeks of strikes, the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei himself, something that seemed unthinkable just months ago. With the Islamic Republic facing what analysts describe as the gravest existential threat in its history, a new supreme leader, Khamenei's own son, Mojtaba, took power. And the pressure to reach some kind of agreement with Washington became overwhelming. The Endurance Front, born from the most radical wing of revolutionary ideology, nurtured by the late Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi, and now spiritually guided by a cleric with openly apocalyptic views, decided this was their moment. Not to seek peace, but to seize power. Remember the question we opened with? Can Iran's new supreme leader actually control the super revolutionaries? We are about to find out just how deep their roots go. And the answer is more unsettling than you think. Let us put faces and names to this story, because that is what makes it real. Mojtaba Khamenei, the new Supreme Leader of Iran, son of Ali Khamenei. He stepped into power in the middle of a war, in the middle of negotiations, with a country traumatized by bombing and a political system fracturing around him. His first challenge is projecting unity. His second, harder challenge is actually achieving it. He has issued statements calling for cohesion. The Endurance Front has responded by calling his negotiators traitors. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, Iran's chief negotiator, a military man and former presidential candidate, he is trying to reach a deal with Washington while being accused by his own side of collusion, disloyalty, and insubordination. He is essentially trying to defuse a bomb while someone behind him is cutting the wrong wires. Mahmoud Nabavian, the parliamentarian who sat inside the Islamabad talks and then went public against them. His move was not spontaneous, it was calculated, and his affiliation with the Paydari Front makes it ideologically coordinated. Saeed Jalili, perhaps the most politically significant face of the movement, former national security chief, veteran hardliner. In the 2021 presidential election, which most of the world ignored, he received 13 million votes. That is not a fringe figure. That is a substantial political constituency. Vahid Jalili, Saeed's brother, senior official inside IRIB, Iran's state broadcaster, the national megaphone. Having a Paydari loyalist at the top of state media is not a coincidence. It is infrastructure. And then there is Ayatollah Mahdi Mirbakiri, the current spiritual leader of the movement. A man who, according to analysts at the Middle East Media Research Institute, has spoken openly about wanting to hasten the end of times through comprehensive conflict with the West. This is not metaphor, he means it literally. These are the people standing between Iran and a nuclear deal. While diplomats talk in air-conditioned rooms, ordinary Iranians are living through something entirely different. 8 weeks of American and Israeli strikes have left the country shaken, infrastructure damaged, the economy, already crippled by decades of sanctions, now facing a new layer of wartime devastation. Moderate voices, intellectuals, reformers, professionals, are facing arrest or choosing to emigrate. The streets of Tehran are not empty, they are full, but not with protesters calling for peace. Every night, the Endurance Front is staging rallies, large ones. Thousands of the Islamic Republic's most committed supporters gathering under the banner of resistance, chanting slogans against the United States, against Israel, and now, increasingly, against their own government's negotiators. These are not just protest marches. They are political theater designed to project power. The message to Mojtaba Khamenei and his team is clear. Make a deal we do not like, and we will make your life very difficult. Meanwhile, Iranian media loyal to the Paydari Front has been publishing incomplete and misleading fragments of the potential agreement, apparently leaked specifically to inflame public opinion and make any deal look like a sellout. Experts have accused faction members of being the source of those leaks. If true, that means people on Iran's own negotiating team were leaking their own government's negotiating position. That is not opposition politics. That is sabotage from the inside. But here's the part no one in mainstream media is talking about, and it changes everything about what you think this faction actually wants. Stay with us. If you are finding this valuable, subscribe right now. We are about to get to the most important revelation in this entire story. The world is watching, and the reactions are telling. Donald Trump, for his part, did not miss the opportunity. After observing the public splits between Iranian negotiators and the Paydari faction, Trump went public with claims that Iran's leadership is fractured and in disarray. The Iranian government, clearly stung, rushed out statements of unity from Mojtaba Khamenei and senior officials. But the damage was done. Trump had broadcast to the entire world that America's negotiating counterpart is fighting itself. Whether Trump is using this to gain leverage at the table or genuinely believes the talks are collapsing, the effect is the same. It emboldens the hardliners. Every time a Western leader declares Iran divided, the Paydari Front points to it as proof that negotiating is weakness. From Europe, the reaction has been cautious alarm. European signatories to the original 2015 deal, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, have been watching these negotiations closely. A new deal would require some level of international verification architecture. But if Tehran cannot even hold its own delegation together, European capitals are asking privately whether a deal is even achievable. Russia and China, both of whom have cultivated ties with Tehran, are watching carefully. A deal that pulls Iran closer to the American orbit undermines their strategic interest in a sanctioned, isolated Iran dependent on their economic and military support. They have their own reasons to let the chaos simmer. And in Israel, the government is watching the Paydari Front sabotage efforts with something approaching satisfaction. An Iran that cannot reach a deal is an Iran that remains vulnerable. Now, here is what almost nobody is saying clearly. The Endurance Front, these super revolutionaries, are not actually opposed to a deal with the United States. Read that again. They are not opposed to a deal. Mohammed Ali Khamenei, editor of Amwaj Media, one of the most respected outlets covering Iranian politics, told CNN something remarkable. Nobody in Iran is against a deal. The fight is about who makes it and on what terms. The Paydari Front's argument goes like this. If Iran keeps fighting, keeps resisting, keeps refusing to capitulate, eventually the United States will be forced to offer better terms. At that point, the hardliners swoop in as the architects of victory. They get the deal, they get the credit, they get the power. This is not theology. This is politics. Their public posture is resistance. Their private ambition is dominance over the next phase of the Islamic Republic. With the old Supreme Leader dead and a new, untested one in place, the vacuum at the top of Iranian power is enormous. Whoever positions themselves as the truest guardian of revolutionary values in this moment will be best placed to fill that vacuum. The Paydari Front is not trying to save Iran from a bad deal. They are trying to capture Iran's future. And the nuclear negotiations are the arena where that battle is being fought. We have shown you the players, the sabotage, and the hidden agenda. Now let us ask the most important question of all. What happens if they succeed? Because the stakes are not just regional, they are global, and they are immediate. Let us be direct about what is on the table here. If the Endurance Front successfully collapses these negotiations, if the leaks, the public attacks, the street pressure, and the internal sabotage convince Washington that Tehran cannot deliver on any agreement, the consequences are severe. Iran's nuclear program, which has been advancing steadily for years, continues unconstrained. Analysts believe Iran already possesses enough enriched uranium to produce multiple nuclear devices if it chose to weaponize. A collapse deal removes the last diplomatic barrier between Iran and that decision. Oil markets, already volatile after 8 weeks of strikes, would face renewed shock. Iran sits on some of the world's largest oil and gas reserves. A return to full confrontation means supply disruption, price spikes, and economic pain that radiates from Tokyo to London to Lagos. For the region, a breakdown in talks risks a return to active military conflict. Israel has already demonstrated its willingness to strike Iranian facilities. The United States has demonstrated its willingness to support those strikes. An Iran that feels it has nothing left to negotiate for is an Iran with little reason for restraint. And domestically, for the Iranian people, already suffering, already exhausted, a collapse of talks means prolonged sanctions, continued economic devastation, and potentially more bombs. The Paydari Front's gamble with permanent resistance is not their gamble alone. 87 million Iranians are holding those chips. Analysts who have spent careers studying Iran are speaking with unusual clarity right now. Hamidreza Azizi, a visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, describes the Paydari Front's ideology in terms that should send chills through any diplomatic negotiator. They view resistance to the United States and Israel as an eternal obligation, he explains. Not a political strategy, but a religious conviction that must endure until the end of history. Their current spiritual leader, Ayatollah Mir Bakiri, has spoken in terms of hastening end-times conflict with the West. Azizi calls those views apocalyptic. Mohammed Ali Khamenei of Amwaj Media frames the internal Iranian struggle in power political terms. The Paydari faction, he argues, has already miscalculated. Their public noise has been perceived, even by many conservatives within Iran, as helpful to Israel and the United States, giving Washington ammunition to claim Tehran is in disarray. That perception has begun to isolate them even within the conservative establishment. Yet Shabani is careful not to dismiss them. They are embedded in media, in parliament, in educational institutions that train the next generation of revolutionary cadres. Their influence is structural, not merely vocal. What analysts agree on is this: the next few weeks will be decisive. If Mojtaba Khamenei can demonstrate real authority over the Paydari Front, isolate them, sideline their media allies, and deliver a coherent negotiating position to Washington, a deal remains possible. If he cannot, the window closes, and nobody knows how long it will be before it opens again. Remember the question we started with: can Iran's new supreme leader actually control the super revolutionaries? We now know the answer is not yet, and the clock on a deal is running. 3 scenarios, all grounded in what we know today. Best case: Mojtaba Khamenei moves decisively in the next 2 to 3 weeks. He publicly marginalizes the Paydari Front, perhaps removing Nabavian from any further diplomatic role, possibly using state media to reframe the hardliners as a destabilizing force rather than guardians of the revolution. The Iranian negotiating team presents a coherent, unified position to Washington. A framework agreement, not a final deal, but a framework, is announced before the end of May. Markets stabilize. The region exhales. Likely case: the negotiations continue in a state of managed chaos. Iran's delegation returns to talks, but is visibly constrained by internal pressure. The deal that emerges, if one emerges, is narrower, weaker, and harder to verify than what either side originally wanted. The Paydari Front claims partial victory. Washington accepts a less-than-ideal agreement because the alternative is worse. The deal holds, but barely, and the next crisis is already being prepared. Worst case: the Paydari Front's sabotage works. Leaked details poison public opinion inside Iran. Mojtaba Khamenei, still consolidating power and unwilling to pick a fight with the most zealous members of his own base, backs away from the negotiating table. Talks collapse. Iran accelerates its nuclear program. Washington faces a choice between accepting a nuclear Iran or authorizing another military strike. And the Middle East tips back toward open war, this time with nuclear dimensions that were not present before. The difference between those 3 outcomes may come down to decisions made in the next 72 hours. We want to hear from you, because this story is not just about diplomats and factions. It is about a choice that will affect every corner of the world. Here is our first question. Do you believe Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has the political strength to sideline the Paydari Front and deliver a real deal? Or is he already too constrained by hardline pressure to act freely? And our second question: the Paydari Front's logic is that continuing to resist will force better terms. In your view, is that a rational strategy or a dangerous delusion that could push the entire region into catastrophe? Tell us below. This community has some of the sharpest international observers anywhere on this platform. We read every comment. Let us talk. Here are the 3 things you need to take away from everything we have covered today. 1. The threat to Iran's nuclear deal is not coming from Washington. It is coming from inside Tehran, from a faction that sat at the negotiating table and then declared the table itself a strategic mistake. 2. The Endurance Front's goal is not to prevent a deal. It is to control Iran's future. The nuclear negotiations are the battlefield for a post-Khamenei power struggle that is happening right now, in real time. 3. The stakes are not abstract. If this faction succeeds in collapsing talks, the path back to a diplomatic solution will be longer, harder, and potentially impossible, with consequences measured in bombs, barrels of oil, and human lives. Watch the next 72 hours. Watch whether Mojtaba Khamenei acts against the faction or continues accommodating it. Watch whether the Paydari Front's street rallies grow or shrink. And watch Washington, because if Trump senses the deal is dying, his response will reshape the entire equation. This story is not over. It is just beginning. Subscribe and hit the bell right now, because when it breaks, we will be the first ones here with the full picture. The super revolutionaries think history is on their side. Whether they are right or catastrophically wrong is a question the next few weeks will answer.